Sorry there, slight technical issue with me leaving my my sound on, so a bit of feedback. I hope everyone had a nice break, brief though it was, and hope you all enjoyed the Continua presentation as well. So now we're going to have a look at Power BI and actually what we've done with Bevica and Power BI, which we've been working on probably over the last 12 months or so, I guess. We have a number of clients who are using it already, and along with how Microsoft are developing Business Central and how we're developing and working on Bevica, we'll continue to work on the Power BI side as well, to a sort of similar release cycle. So first of all, I just wanted to sort of frame what's required with it. So Power BI is requires a few licensing things. So one is there is a subscription for you to have the Power BI data sets and reports available for you as a business. So that's done on a per company basis, because each endpoint, which we'll get onto a bit later, is company specific. For users to consume this, and this is obviously outside of the core Business Central licensing, you do need to have a Power BI Pro license, and that is so your users, well, one, you need one so that you can create reports and manage them, and you also, your users who are going to consume the shared reports, they would need one as well. Currently, last time I checked, only about £7.50 per user per month. You only need a Pro license. There are some other licenses on there, so the premium and premium per user, which you don't actually need. And for most cases with our clients, it's probably not required. That's a fairly significant cost increase as well on that. So it's just the Power BI Pro license that you need. And depending on your Microsoft 365 licenses, there may be some included licensing with that. It typically tends to be on the more expensive side, though, the E5s, etc. There are some requirements for us as well as users. Now, we have delegated admin access to your Business Central environment and Bevica, which means that we can manage your environment, we can access it in order to support you. However, that delegated admin does not allow us to consume the APIs, which are basically the way that we get the data out of Bevica and Business Central. And we also then, so we do need to have a license, a sort of named user license on your environment. That just needs to be a team member license, so it's not a full user that's required, it's only consuming the data. And we also then need a Power BI Pro license on your tenant as well, and that's so that we can manage the whole Power BI solution for you. So that means that we can link it up to your tenant and your environment, and also then publish the data as well. So what is Power BI? I guess we've looked at this a few times on several bugs, but just to sort of frame it, it is a service, and there's kind of three key bits to it. So if we start with Bevica, which is obviously Business Central, that's where all your transactions and records, so transactions, sales orders, item ledger entries, etc., records, things like items and customers. And then within Bevica, we've created a set of Bevica Power BI APIs. So they are basically a way for us to export the data from Bevica, and then that can be imported into Power BI. Now, the reason that's done is it means that we have complete control. It also means all the Bevica fields that may be on there, so where we've enhanced the item record or the customer record, for example, will also be on there. And actually, the standard APIs, of which there are quite a few from Microsoft, tend to not be comprehensive enough. So as an example, there would be a standard API from Business Central that would have items on it, for example, but that wouldn't have all the Bevica fields on, and it probably won't have a number of fields which you might want on there. So that's why we create the Bevica APIs. Now, you then have Power BI Desktop, which is actually free to download, so there's no cost to that. And that is really the authoring tool for creating reports. So what we do with that is we are connecting Power BI to your Bevica instance through the APIs. So that's ingesting the data, consuming that into there. Within there as well, we're then creating a data model. So what's a data model? It is basically a set of all the data, so the tables. So if you think about items, customers, item ledger entries, for example, We're creating relationships between them. So that says, well, if I look at an item ledger entry, it's got an item number on it. Actually, it's related to the item table and all the rich data about the item through the item number. And then we also put calculations in there. So that is doing things like saying, well, actually sum the quantity, sum sales, calculate margin or something like that. We then create reports. So again, we'll have a look at those in a bit. That is basically the kind of the graphical interface where people can consume, review, look at reports, do analysis, etc. And then crucially, from Power BI Desktop, that's then published to the Power BI service. Now, the Power BI service is run by Microsoft. It's hosted by them in their cloud infrastructure, so in Azure, much like Business Central is now if you go for a SaaS environment. And that's where your subscription comes in, because what that means is that your users then have access to that service and they can consume the reports which we, T-Vision, or you as users have published to that. So within the Power BI service, the reports will be published and we set up the reporting, the refresh policies in there. So how frequently do you want to refresh it? Now with a Power BI Pro license, the key thing to understand, and that's just actually true for all the types of licenses, it's not actually a live connection to Bevica or Business Central. So typically you'd refresh that overnight. You could refresh it more frequently if you wanted to. The reason why it's not a live connection is primarily because you want your reporting to be quick. So what you don't want to do is every time you say, want to change your item number on a report, that it's got to go and consume that data again from Bevica and Business Central in order to get the data. So the purpose of having a refresh policy and setting it up overnight, for example, means that every night your data gets pulled from Bevica and then is stored in the Power BI service, which means that when you come to report on it, actually you're using a static data set at that point, which is then very performative to do the calculations and things like that. Power BI service is also where your end users consume those reports and where they can do report editing and also where reports can be shared amongst other users. There's a whole set of permissions and things like that within that as well to help manage that. So the Power BI offering from us is all three of those things. So we have created the APIs in Bevica and we continue to develop them. We've created the data model in Power BI Desktop and we're creating the reports in Power BI Desktop, and then we can publish those to your environment, to your Power BI service for your users to access. So it's all within your environment. It's not as though we're ingesting data into any of our environments. So it is all controlled and fully sort of sandboxed within the confines of your tenant as well. So how does the data refreshing work, which is something that I mentioned? So you've got Bevica at the top here, and that's obviously where you're posting your transactions, managing your business. We've got the Bevica APIs, which are the extension that we've put in there. Now they're not user visible, it's not as though you as a user can navigate to those, but that's how we're getting the data out. Those are connected to the Power BI service once those reports have been published, and then the refresh schedule has been set up, which is the one on the left. And obviously, next time the refresh schedule gets triggered, so as I said, typically overnight, could be more frequently, then it goes through that cycle again.
Ben, someone's asked a question.
Yep.
They said, our reports are already created. Can you assume you just link that back into Bevica?
You can view your reports in Bevica, so I can show you that. So you can access Power BI reports from Bevica. So you can have a pane on there which allows you to interact with your Power BI reports. You can also have fact boxes. So if we talk about an item, for example, you can use a Power BI report to be on the side of the fact box against your record, and that will obviously change as you change to, say, items or something like that. Hopefully that answers your question. If it doesn't, then obviously my details can be shared at the end, and I'm happy to have any conversations to clarify anything. So just looking at the reports, and again, we'll have a delve into this. So we actually have two data documents. We've got what we call the core one, and that covers sales, purchases, inventory, open sales and open purchase, and the sales ledger and purchase ledger. And within that are all the things like your items, your customers, your vendors, and things like that. The APIs that are behind that, so essentially the data that we're pulling out, we've got the item ledger entries. So that has all your item movements and the cost and sales values against that. So that covers sales, purchases and inventory. There's dates, which is some of the functionality that Power BI has with dates. Then we've got items, customers, vendors, customer ledger entries and vendor ledger entries. So we've got the sales ledger and purchase ledger in there. Open sales orders and their lines, open purchase orders and their lines. Reservation entries, which is actually how Bevica allocate or can be used to allocate stock. So it's not paid or unpaid reserves. You can see that's at the bottom as well. And dimension sets as well. So dimension sets means that if you are using dimensions to categorize, let's say, a trade channel or something like that, all of those reports can then be filtered by a trade channel to be able to say, look at on trade or off trade or something like that. On the finance side, there's two real aspects to that at the moment. So that's the general ledger and the bank ledger. And the data behind that is really the general ledger entries and the bank ledger entries. Dates again, the chart of accounts, that gives you a structure behind it, bank accounts, so that gives it a structure behind it, and also general ledger budgets as well. So it's then possible to analyse your budget versus actuals. And that was really the short introduction to that. So that was just to help frame things. And now I'd just like to delve into the Power BI service. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen, or I'll just switch, and then I'll be back in a second. Okay, so we're here in Bevica here. So one of the questions, which is something I did mention, is you've got these Power BI reports on here. It's poorly sized today for some reason, not quite sure why, but luckily within here I can expand the report to then have my Power BI report up here. So this is now actually connecting to the Power BI service kind of in the same pop-up window. So it's kind of fully interactive. So if I want to change dates, for example, I can change the date filter on here, and you can see that the reports get updated with that. See, it's demo data, so there are some limitations around what I've got. Or actually, if I wanted to then, look at a particular individual customer, for example. So this is using Bevica data, and this is just a Power BI report in general. So it's not related necessarily to anything that's on the page. And we'll have a look at a fact box in a minute, hopefully. Now, one good thing about Power BI as well is system agnostic. So what does that mean? It means that, yes, we've connected it to Bevica. It can connect to other systems as well. It can connect to SQL Server databases. It can connect to Excel workbooks if you wanted to, and a plethora of other types of systems as well. So it does mean as well that if you had, say, I don't know, a different piece of software for a specific reason, you could actually have some of those reports in here to be surfaced in Bevica as well, using data and potentially even merge them together. Within here as well, I can select which reports I want. So I can come in here as an admin and determine which reports I want. So for example, I can have any of these ones. Now if we then have a look at an item, for example, then this is where I can have a Power BI report as a fact box. So this is quite a simple example just to say some stock and movements over the last 12 months. But you see that as I go through it, the fact box changes to represent that. So that's actually very useful, because sometimes one of the limitations on fact boxes is that you don't always have the information that you want. So potentially maybe you're having to drill into something else. So whether it's trying to see a mini sales analysis or something like that, obviously the size of the pane is fairly limited. So it's not a rich report like we saw on the other page. But it does give you lots of possibilities to just kind of surface information that you may not naturally have access to. And you can change these reports as well. So as standard, you can have them on the items, you can have them on customers and vendors as well. So if we just move into the Power BI service, and this is basically just an overview of what I've got in here. So we can see these red ones here, these are my data sets, and now I've got a lot of reports over here. Now, usually you'd have one person who would administer this, and actually the end user experience would be something a bit more like this, where we're looking at a Power BI app. So that's a report that has been published and is then centrally deployed. So if we just have a look at this, so this is a daily sales. In this case, it's looking at the 24th of January because that's where we've got data. And it's just to try and give a kind of overview. So we've got some sales values, some margin figures, etc. And then we've got some dimensional analysis as well. So here we've got salespeople and we've got sales. Now, along the top, I do have my dimensions. So as an example, I can filter and say, actually, I just want to see my private client sales and apply that. And now the values are changing because of it's filtering to that. So that's where actually all your dimensions can come into play. So dimensions within Bevica and in Business Central in general are very flexible. You determine what they are. Now, typically in most implementations, we'll try and suggest some standard ones. So things like trade channel, things like a cost center or a department are fairly standard. But it does mean that, you know, if you have particular ways that you want to analyze your business and you've got that set up with dimensions, it's flexible in order to cover that. It's not kind of hard coded with a predefined set of those. There's just a bit of setup implementation which we need to do that. So as I clear that, you can see that some of these figures have dropped through again. Now, Power BI gives you lots of options around things like having maps and things like this. So here's a quite simple example of a map. It does mean though, if I go down to individual customers, for example, so I'm just looking at this customer here, it'll then give me some details about where they are. The postcodes could be slightly off because it's demo data, so we're not necessarily using proper and full addresses, but very interactive as well. So just coming through, this is looking at a daily sales one. So the idea behind this is that you can look at your sales per day. There's a monthly one as well. And again, this is just set up to be a month. So again, in this case, I'm looking at January. And similar sort of layout here. And again, we can go through these. But then one of the great things is being able to do things like comparisons versus previous periods. So again, you can see along the top, I've got all my dimensions. So actually, if I wanted to look at, say, my wholesale, I can do that, which is going to filter down all the data. But on here, for example, I've got some details here, just to give me some summaries of sales in the current period. So in January, what was it last year? And as I scroll down, I can see some year-on-year differences as well. And then actually, I can get into some bit more detail on this one here, this pane in the middle. So seeing what the current period is, what's been invoiced, what's shipped, so shipped but not yet invoiced, and what's open. So open means that it's a sales order that has neither been shipped or posted to invoice. Now you can see last year everything's invoiced, which is a good thing. So we've not still got any open transactions, and I can see a year-on-year value and a year-over-year percentage. So this is one of the great things about Power BI is that they have these very rich what they call time intelligence features, which make it very powerful to be able to do comparatives versus other periods. So whether it's looking at month to date versus the same month last year, whether it's looking at this year versus last year, whether it's looking at a kind of a moving annual total, whether it's looking at a year-to-date figure or something like that. There's a lot of functions that enable you to be able to report on those kind of things. And you can obviously see over here as well, we can even get down to a day level to kind of see the difference. Now, one of the things which we've done fairly recently is putting in some prepayment details. So again, you can use prepayments within Bevica, you know, for various reasons. On-premise is quite a common one, which we're seeing it for, but also just if you've got private clients as an example where you don't want to ship goods before they're paid, then it's a great functionality with great controls over it. So we can see here, we've got some prepayments options, some sales with prepayments, and then we can see that we've got some without prepayments. You can see it's 116,000 here, and I've got some with prepayments, and then I've got a bit more detail here. So I can see, actually, I've got a prepayment here, so 3,000 odd. That's actually been paid by the customer, it's just not been shipped yet. And then I've got open prepayments, so we've got prepayments that are outstanding. As we go through, I'm not going to click on every single report, but for example, we can get down to kind of overview things by customers. And actually, if you then want to drill down into detail, like a pick a Sardo in this case, and then see my detail for a Sardo, I can get through to customer scorecards and again see it in a slightly different way. If I want to look versus salespeople, I can have a look at AH in this case and see how they're performing. I can have a look at AR, who's not sold much this year. Again, it's demo data. And even get through to vendors. So there's lots of other ones as well. So we've got open sales orders on here, got open purchase orders, so I can see what purchase detail, what purchase orders I've got. I can see things like what goods received, not invoice I've got, so how much have I got outstanding, and get down to the detail as well. Have a look at inventory, for example. So what's my inventory position at the moment? What's my inventory value? How does that break down into actuals, expected costs? What's the trend over time, for example, so I can see year by year comparisons, and I can drill down to individual items as well if I want to. Finance reports, so again, fairly simple ones at the moment, and then also just looking at, say, the customer ledger, for example. Now, one of the ideas behind what we've done with the Bevica Power BI reports is that we've created the data set, which we feel is very comprehensive, and obviously we're continuing to develop that. And we've created a set of standard reports. One of the great things is actually, once you have this, you can actually start to create your own reports using that data. It comes back to that kind of concept of always having a single source of truth. So you're not having multiple people exporting data from Bevica into, say, Excel, running some analysis on that and presenting that to you. And then if Claudio says does it in a slightly different way or at a slightly different time, maybe those figures are slightly different. The benefit of using Power BI means that actually everything is centralized. You've got one set of reports and data which you can then be using to do that analysis. So everybody should get the same values. So once you've got this, actually, it's very easy to create copies of these reports. So in this case, I'm just going to a slightly different view, and I've got my customer sales summary. Again, this is something that you can do. So I'm just going to copy this. Just give it a simple name. And what that's actually done is create a copy of those whole reports. And now I can then start editing things. So actually, maybe I want to change some of these things. And now I have access to all of the data on here. So for example, okay, in this case, I was having a look at sales margin. Obviously, there are some requirements in terms of understanding the data structures, but we have documented that and we can provide training on that. But maybe I don't want sales margin. Maybe actually I want to put in sales quantity on here. So you can change those reports yourself. Maybe you don't like that type of layout. Maybe you want a bar chart. You can do that. Maybe you want a table. Now, again, with a bit of training, it's very easy for generally a super user, but also it can be end users to start building these reports themselves. Yeah, if you wanted to create a new report, again, I can create quite a simple one that I can take my customers, take my customer ID on here. I'll grab some details from, say, my sales. Have a look at my sales amount actual. That was effective. There we go. So sorry, it's just refreshing there. Maybe I want to drop in my sales margin percentage on there as well. And then maybe I want to put in a flag that is it completely invoiced or not. And I'll put a filter up here. So I can say, I want to see if it's completely invoiced. So okay, I've got some stuff that hasn't been completely invoiced, showing zero value. The reason is that I've got actual sales on there. So I'll just change that.
I have a couple more questions.
And maybe I can do it full suit. I think, yeah.
Where is the source of history in a new Bevica install? And secondly, somebody different, can you use DAX within this environment?
So if we start with the first question, the sales history, there is a table within Bevica which is for your sales history. So if you're coming from another system, you can import that. And sales history is brought into the Power BI reports as well. And then basically becomes merged in with your actual data. So down here, I've actually got the item sales history down here. And we've got some measures in here, for example. I don't know if I've actually got any sales values in here. No, I don't have any history in there, but it is in there out of the box. It's a case of importing that as part of your implementation. But as I said, the framework to do that's all there, and actually the Power BI report will merge that together. Yeah, bear in mind there is typically a requirement because you're going to put that data into Bevica. You do need to shape it to match with Bevica. If you wanted to, you could import that data directly from your other system or from in another mechanism, but that obviously wouldn't be included in the standard reports. The other question was around DAX. So DAX is the query language which you write Power BI measures in, and yes, so it's a Power BI report. If I download the desktop file, then I can alter the DAX in that. So the reason why we now have this Power BI suite is that most of that DAX has been done. So you don't have to have that skill set in order to do that. All the calculations, so if I take sales, for example, has been predefined in this report. So you're not having to calculate actually what is sales all, that's all been done for you. If you have that skill set though, you can download the files, you can add your own DAX if you require it. Obviously bear in mind if you do that, it's kind of outside of the remit of our direct support, but we're happy to offer, whether it's paid support, training, assistance in whatever means. From our point of view, it's to try and give a standard offering to clients that's very feature rich, but then also allows you to kind of grow, whether that is growing by enhancing that reporting suite, whether it's developing your own sets of reports that are very specific to your business or how you want to see the data, but without you having to kind of go through the cost and the process and the development time of actually creating something very bespoke. There is still that option. We can bespoke this in terms of if you have very specific needs, but as I said, our feeling at the moment is it's fairly comprehensive.
Thank you.
So yeah, I mean, that was kind of it in summary, really. So, as I said, the idea, we've done essentially most of the hard work. We've created all the data models. We've created a set of standard reports, but as I just tried to demonstrate there, very simple with a bit of training and a bit of knowledge to be able to kind of manipulate them yourselves and make them customized to your requirements. The data is not changing, it's all the same data, so you've kind of got that single source of truth as well. And yeah, that's our Power BI offering for Bevica as it currently stands. So if there are any other further questions?
No, not at the moment. Thank you so much, Ben.
Thank you.
Oh, hang on. So that's another question. No, not at the moment. No. Okay. All right. Should get the. There we go. Back to Claudio.
Okay. Yep. So my part now.
Camera.
Camera.
Oh, sorry, there was just one last question. That's all right. How easy is it to start using Power BI?
I guess I have a slightly, from my point of view, very easy. I think with the standard reports that we have, it's kind of a turnkey solution because the hard work's done. We plumb it up to your environment, publish it up there, and then it's available. There's a lot of online training. So Microsoft on their sites have a lot of kind of guided learning. There's lots of third-party websites that will take you through guided learning. We can offer training and support as well. So I think the benefit of going our Bevica Power BI route is obviously that's all been done. So you're not having to start from learning how do I create a data model, how do I ingest the data, how do I create these relationships and all the calculations. That's all done. So then you can concentrate on essentially doing the user interface of those reports in order to make the data as beneficial for you running your business and analysing your performance, rather than having to understand and spend a lot of time learning how to code things, for example.
But Ben, if we gave you a Power BI license on a customer site and said, start now, plumbing it all in, how long would it take you before someone would be able to see the results with their data?
Do you mean using the Bevica BI or starting from scratch?
No, the Bevica BI, the Bevica pack.
A week, I'd say, because it's all standard. We drop it in, plumb it up, and then really it's good to go. I mean, just to frame it, if we did that as a bespoke piece of work, you'd be looking at a number of weeks of paid consultancy and development to do that. Whereas that's all done, it's now just a monthly subscription.
Thank you.
Okay.